It's not memos, but rather emails that have Beacon Hill buzzing about whether Stan Rosenberg will return to his post as Senate President. Over the weekend, a Boston Globe report by Yvonne Abraham revealed his husband, Bryon Hefner, had full access to Rosenberg's official Senate email account. As you probably know, the Globe uncovered multiple claims of sexual harassment and assault against Hefner back in November by people who were concerned about his influence, and Rosenberg temporarily stepped aside from his role as Senate President in response. But this whole thing is not looking good for him, especially after controversy arose in 2014 over Hefner boasting about his Senate influence, at which time Rosenberg sent a letter to his colleagues stating, quote, "I have enforced a firewall between my private life and the business of the Senate and will continue to do so." And yet, the latest Globe report also claims that Hefner managed to influence senators to include an amendment in last year's budget, an accusation that Rosenberg is forcefully denying, telling us in a statement, quote, "I did not allow Bryon Hefner to influence my actions and decisions as Senate President or to influence the Senate's actions and decisions, despite any suggestions to the contrary. I continue to rely on the Senate Ethics Committee investigation to determine all the facts, and I look forward to its completion." So what do these latest revelations mean for the investigation? Are Rosenberg's days numbered? And should we even care? Joining me now are Katie Lannan of State House News Service. Katie, it's good to see you. Frank Phillips, State House Bureau Chief for the Boston Globe. Good to see you too, Frank. Is it fair to say yesterday's revelation in Yvonne's piece totally blows away the whole firewall assertion on the part of Rosenberg?
Well, they can argue that it's not the original firewall.
What does that mean?
Well, the original firewall, it would have nothing to do in the business of the Senate or in the hiring of the Senate. The evidence here is he was always trying to get into the Senate. He was trying to go in. He put that amendment in through another senator. He was trying to text and harass the staff, and he was always trying to get in. I think what Yvonne did so interesting was that he had access to Stan's email account. Now, that's a lot more serious. And I think what the investigators have to find out is, did he use it in any way that got him in past the firewall and into the business of the Senate?
Yeah, I think this is an important point. I'm not saying access is insignificant, because some will say that does pierce or cross the firewall. But is there proof in Yvonne Abraham's piece that he did influence Senate business, or proof that he alleged that he did have influence? You know, understand what I mean? Over Senate business.
Sure. That's really one of the questions I think a lot of people have right now, is whether Bryon Hefner is claiming influence or if he did have the sway to back it up.
Does it matter, by the way? If he had access to the email and he only claimed that he had influence, is that enough? Is that too fine a line for Rosenberg's defense, or does it not matter to most people he's in the Senate with?
I mean, I think, certainly Stan Rosenberg has a lot of fans in the Senate. A lot of people have really been kind of rooting for him to come back as Senate President. But there has been a kind of accumulation of incidents involving Bryon Hefner that it might be at a tipping point at this point, whether or not he did have the influence he claimed to have.
On this note about a lot of people rooting for him, I'm not there like you are, but I get the sense that's true too. And I assume it's for two reasons. One, because everybody thinks he's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy.
And two, he actually promised small d democracy and delivered it, as opposed to every other Senate and House leader who promises it and doesn't deliver it, meaning Senate chairs actually get to show some autonomy. Is that not a fair statement?
Yeah, here's the problem with Stan, is that as a senator and Senate President, he's very effective, he's very popular, and he put in this shared leadership, which is getting everybody involved in setting the agenda, giving them what they wanted to do and getting it through, and they really appreciated that for him. And he knew how to do it. He knows the workings of the Senate. And he's also, as you say, a nice guy that everybody likes. He has his domestic life is in turmoil, and he let that spill into his public life. And that is what his problem is here. And it's more the optics than anything else. That it's just too much for these people. And I think when it first broke in November, it was okay. People held together, and no one could put the votes to get a replacement for him, because people wanted to see what was going to happen. But I think this last round of what Yvonne has got in the paper has really sort of broken that up, and people are saying it's just the optics are too much.
Well, it's not just optics. I mean, the governor commented on this today, and well, here's what he had to say, assuming that the allegations in Yvonne's story are true. Here's Governor Baker, who generally does not play a partisan line up there on Beacon Hill. Here he is.
Well, if those allegations are true, and at this point they're allegations, then I don't see any way he could remain Senate President, no.
Does it matter to the I hate the expression the people's business. I can't believe it has used it. Does it matter to the people's business who the Senate president is? Does the average person on the street care at all about this, or is this totally inside baseball?
Whether or not they care who holds that chair, there's certainly a dynamic that who holds the presidency influences. You know, Governor Baker, Stan Rosenberg, and House Speaker DeLeo have been working together for a few years, and now you add a new person into that mix right now in the form of acting President Harriet Chandler.
Who doesn't want the job, she says.
Right, who doesn't want the job. And there's kind of questions, too, over what the future holds for the Senate long term. And we're going into the budget debate now. We've got some major policy issues, criminal justice being one, negotiating between the House and the Senate.
But are they going to have any different? It's a liberal, if he leaves, being replaced by a liberal, isn't it? I don't mean that.
Sure, she is one of his leadership team.
Or Spilka or Domenico.
I've talked to a number of senators who have told me that they're not getting a lot of constituent calls about this. They get a little about the pay raise. It's interesting. Not the kind of outrage that we used to get back in the old days when there was 8 pay raises. Yeah. There's not a lot of constituent blowback on these stories. And they're not reacting to that.
Well, you say not much blowback. Let me talk about something on which I think there's virtually no blowback. Speaking about Yvonne Abraham, this is a lower profile thing. Came out October 27th. Here's a quote from Yvonne's story. A dozen women worked in and around the State House describe a climate of harassment and sexual misconduct perpetrated by some of the men who hold current present tense, a disproportionate share of the power in the Commonwealth. And she goes on to say some House members looking at pornography in the House chamber. Where is this? I mean, she basically says that sexual harassment and misconduct are rampant on Beacon Hill. That was October 27th. What is that?
Where's Speaker DeLeo? Did he create a special commission to look at it? Not that I know of.
He launched a review right after that story came out.
And what's going on? That was months ago.
Right. He has House counsel looking at it. They've held some listening sessions. I believe the final report isn't due until March, which is still quite a way off.
Are they talking about naming names? I mean, is anybody taking any of this seriously on Beacon Hill, or is it just
That's politics? The question. Everything is going on kind of out of public view right now, and there's a significant question over whether the Rosenberg-Hefner investigation has kind of pushed the rest of this broader issue to the back burner.
Is Rosenberg going to be gone? I mean, the rumors today are that he is about to resign. Is that your sense of the lay of the land here?
I mean, it certainly seems like the overwhelming feeling that had been he will come back might be starting to shift, but at this point
I mean as a state senator, I don't mean as...
Oh, as president? I mean...
No, I mean as a state senator.
You mean as a state
senator.
Does he disappear,
yeah.
He pulled papers to run for re-election.
How about you?
He's hugely popular in his district. This is not an issue for him. If he wants to come back, I don't think he's made any of the decisions.
Al Franken was hugely popular in Minnesota, too,
sure.
wasn't he? Is he a senator?
Yeah, I think he is.
Katie, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
Jerk, Frank. Nice to see you. Thank you. Called me a jerk. By the way, we reach out to every member of the Senate not being investigated, not doing the investigation, not running for the position. 27 senators in all. They all either declined or did not respond to our invitation.